So hi, Mark. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was a really good chat last time, so happy to be here.
Yeah, and after the conversation, I try now to Google you, and what I found, you are one of the committers or maybe even initiators of the Lambda Powertools project.
Yeah, so it has come out from some of my colleagues. So it's all been written by people in the same job family as me, people who work with customers every day, but are typically programmers who are now more architects, but still enjoy programming a lot. So it's been an interesting project to kind of help us get back into doing some more day-to-day programming.
Okay, so when the project was initiated?
Oh gosh, I think it must be over a year, maybe 18 months now. Oh. And it actually started in the Python space. So one of my colleagues, a fantastic person called Hater Lesser, started a Python version, and it was really, really successful. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But we saw how useful it was with working with customers, and myself and another person at AWS decided that we would love to, bring the same sort of functionality to Java. And that's, I think it's been over a year now. I think it was maybe October. So maybe 14 months old now.
So the question is now, so I look at the project, and so far all my Java AWS Lambdas were more or less vanilla. So there was no external dependencies. I just tried if I had something with AWS SDK. So now, what is actually the added value of there's I already see there are several modules, and the names are CloudFormation, core logging, metrics, parameters, SQS, for instance, test suite, tracing, and validation. I think these are the major use cases, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Powertools is a collection of client libraries. So it's a set of utilities to help customers with the most common Lambda patterns. So the most common problems that people have with programming, and we're trying to take some of the best practice that we've seen and then bundle it together and then produce it as an open source library, and then help people to kind of reduce having to code things over and over again. I guess just like everybody. We started with 3 core modules, and these were the 3 most common topics that we had when we spoke to customers. Customers would ask us how to do logging, how to do tracing, and how to do custom metrics. Okay. And they would come up time and time again. So those were the things that we focused on first. And that is, often a very different thing for Lambda and cloud native applications. So we really focused on each one, and we thought about what is important about each of those subjects. So for logging, for example, the Powertools logging module produces structured logs. So all of the logs are produced as JSON format, and then we add hopefully some additional value by adding the ability to add some of the Lambda context. Okay. So it automatically adds some information about the Lambda that it's running in. But you can also add your own annotations or your own entries to that log format. So maybe it's the customer ID that you're working on, or maybe it's the order ID that you're processing. And then all of the logs are produced with those IDs in. And then the hope being that then that is much easier for you to search with tools like CloudWatch Log Insights to then find the particular order request that you were looking for, or maybe there's been a problem and you have to hunt down what's happening for a particular request. You've got all of the information there. It's all easily searchable and fast to find.
Question regarding structured logging. So I get a question also from my customers and clients, and I did some experiments, and actually CloudWatch is good enough, to parse unstructured data. It is a little bit slower, this is my impression, than with JSON, but we could actually raise alerts and read the just reasonable, right? So without JSON. So I think structured logging, maybe you refer to JSON, and we were somehow structured but not JSON. It's just one system out print and logging. So
yeah, absolutely, it will absolutely help with that. I guess it's the ease of which you can query that data. So with structured logging, it just makes it, I guess, a little bit easier to write something that looks quite like SQL, and you can pull out all of those logs specific to whatever parameters that you're interested in. So yeah, absolutely, CloudWatch Insights will help you with unstructured data. You just probably need to put in a little bit more effort into writing the queries correctly.
Okay. For me, it was really almost no difference. So I could actually query. There was I don't know what's the name of the CloudWatch query is, whether there is a name, but everything worked just fine. Of course, with a structured query, it is a lot faster. For I don't know, as a CloudWatch is very good in reading JSON. But this is what your clients ask you. So they said, okay, we cannot find our logs, or what was the problem in CloudWatch? So or was it just nice?
Yeah, I guess when people are trying to debug issues, it is hard to trace down the correct set of logs, and also it becomes a developer kind of what's the word best practice, or how do you encourage people to include the correct amount of data to do logs that are meaningful and easy to debug later on. Mm-hmm. So we think that this client allows, or this client-side library allows customers to be able to produce best practice logs so that they are able to debug things fast and efficiently.
So I'm with you. So what you did, you also saying, okay, these are the parameters which are crucial for logging, right? And this is what we had to invent by ourselves. True. So what we do, you have an interface and they say, okay, these 3 or 4 parameters are crucial. You have to provide them. Otherwise, this is meaningless. Of course, if we just say, use system out print line, then the developers could write whatever they like, and then you won't find anything there. So, so I got you. So you are not only, this is not just a logging framework, because what we do on Lambda, we are just writing, to system out print line, basically, right? So to standard.
Yes. Out. Yeah. And this continues to print to standard out. Mm-hmm. It's just a wrapper around Log4j, and helps you to produce, meaningful, hopefully what we think is best practice logging, and help you to do that in a good way, where we're hoping just to ease the burden a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But I think the size of the thing is just looking on the POM. That's the first thing I'm doing, and it comes with you need JSON, but I think Lambda uses JSON, right, behind the scenes.
Lambda actually uses both, dependent on the request that comes in.
Okay.
So yeah.
Because I already wondered, because there's the JSON with Google JSON and the JSON, and I thought, the JSON comes from my libraries, but okay. And there is a Log4j. Why you need Log4j?
So we found that we asked our customer base, and the majority of people were using Log4j. So we wanted to make it a really easy migration. So if you're using Log4j at the moment, which a vast amount of people are, mm-hmm. It's a very easy migration path to go from just using Log4j to using Powertools logging. Yeah.
And it's nicely documented. So I'm already on the page now, Lambda Powertools for the homepage about logging. And looks nice. So the first was logging. So what I understand, because logging is what, every project usually starts. There's lots of, opinions about loggings. But what you also have, you have metrics. And the metrics, I absolutely see the point. The problem is, what we can do in Lambda, this is maybe interesting. So it's not obvious. If you package a Quarkus application as a Lambda, So it is exactly the same code as Quarkus outside Lambda. So it's a micro profile with JAX-RS interface. And what we can do in micro profile, we can put annotations like counted or timed. But the problem is the metrics are stored in memory, which is great. But on Lambdas, it doesn't. If you are lucky in test, it could even work because you will always come back to the same Lambda. But under load, you get lots of parallel Lambdas, so the metrics won't work anymore. So you cannot rely on scraping. So we needed something different. And what is interesting, what you did. So how your metrics are working.
Yeah, so our metrics use, again, CloudWatch. Mm-hmm. And what we were finding was people were using an API call to CloudWatch, which is called put metrics. Mm-hmm. And this is a synchronous call that you can make to CloudWatch, which, if you're familiar with Lambda, is bad for a couple of reasons. One, you're paying a price for the duration of your Lambda function. So whenever you make a synchronous call, you're paying a tax for the duration of that call. Now, these APIs aren't long, but depending on what metrics you're pushing, obviously that has an impact. And that's something that we want to reduce. So what PowerTools metrics does is it uses an asynchronous method of communication to CloudWatch. And this is using a little known system called embedded metrics format, or CloudWatch EMF for short. And what happens behind the scenes is a specific JSON structure is logged to standard out. And when that is seen in CloudWatch, CloudWatch knows to take that JSON structure and turn it into custom metrics. So this is all asynchronous. So your Lambda functions run for a shorter period of time. And two, you're not paying for the API call that you would make to CloudWatch API. So we find that this is a win-win situation for virtually all Lambda customers. And again, PowerTools metrics takes that EMF structure, which is not the most friendly JSON structure, and turns it into a Java client library, so that it's much more easy to use and that handles the Lambda programming model a bit more efficiently. So after the end of each invoke, we know that the Lambda function has returned and that we can flush the metrics straight to CloudWatch so that you get the metrics as soon as possible.
That's interesting because I use the EMF indirectly with the Prometheus agent for CloudWatch. I think this is the proper name. And this was on Fargate, so we had more traditional serverless applications. So we're still Quarkus, but not Lambdas. And we had exactly the annotation. So it was like lift and shift. So we used, we had an old non-cloud environment and we put it on Fargate. And then the agent just scraped the Quarkus. And the interesting part is it uses, the Fargate to discover, where the workload is running. And the agent writes the EMF and what EMF entries. And the interesting part is they just appear immediately as a metrics in CloudWatch. So, click on the link and you can create very easily your own dashboard. And this was the easiest possible integration, which worked great. And what I already did, I look at the EMF, say, cool, now we can write our own metrics very easily. And it's already done in the Powertools. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very lightweight. All of the work that we do in PowerTools all has a specific set of tenets that we try and live by. And part of that is that this library is specifically built for Lambda. We don't target any other compute platforms, so we don't target Fargate or anything else. This is just specifically for Lambda programmers to build the best that they can. And again, another tenet that we have is to keep things lean. So where possible, we'll always choose the leanest method because we know that's really important to our customers and make sure that everything is as lean as practically it can be.
And how big is it? So if you add, the Lambda, let's say logging or logging, tracing, and metrics seems like a common setup. How much code is it? Is it like 1 meg or?
You've totally caught me out there. I actually don't know.
This would be what I would do the first, on my AWS environment, just put it to Maven, create one jar and see how big it is. And if it's too big, then I would try to slim it down or do something about that.
Yeah, I think file size is definitely a good metric to look at and be aware of, but it's not always everything. So it will depend on how the code is written and what exactly is happening. So I wouldn't always worry too much about the file size, but how things are written as well. So this is all done with ahead of time tooling. So there is no like runtime or reflection used.
Okay.
So we are really trying to build something which does not add much overhead at all.
So you really the how you developed that was without reflection, easy code. It's like, okay, this is actually great, because if we just load all the libraries from outside and hope it will work, usually it will be really slow.
Yeah, so the code that we've written, it's not a large library. We are standing on the giants of some other dependencies, absolutely. But the code that we've written is as lean as we can make it. It's all ahead of time compilation.
Story to tell. It was last year. Someone approached me and said, okay, Java is unusable as Lambda. Say, why that? And showed me a code. This was just one line, like hello world, log hello world. And I asked, okay, what is behind the log? And it turned out he found several libraries. There was everything, the old Java logging ecosystem inside the Lambda. And this was huge. And it took, no kidding, like 5 seconds to execute. And I say, okay, this is a crazy. Why? And I say, okay, why is Lambda so sensitive? I just added like 5 dependencies and it became to be slow. And say, okay, but why you need, your entire framework with 3 abstractions and why you're doing this, right? And this was an interesting conversation because he also showed me some Python code, which was, of course, reasonable. It's not like in Python, there was no counterpart of Python logging framework. So, okay, you cannot just compare, Java with entire logging history performance with Python with nothing. I mean, and then do, system out println in Java with Python console out. So I'm really sensitive about logging because logging, caching, and configuration is very popular in Java projects.
And configuration is another project that we have. Well, or maybe not configuration, but secrets management. So often you need to access secrets to make database connections. And obviously AWS has a number of different services that can be used for secrets management or configuration management. So we've created a module called parameters, and that has an interface over a number of different services that can be used to do configuration or secrets management. So that is a nice way to handle database connections, or maybe it's a secret to another API, or maybe it's just environmental specific configuration that you want to pull in at runtime.
Yes, what's also nice, look at the documentation right now. So there, you even support SSM, the parameter store, seems like, right?
Yes. And
parameter store is somehow widely underestimated. So it's a great service where you can globally store some configuration which is accessible from everywhere. And what parameter store also provides is encryption.
Yes.
So you can even have encrypted configuration from parameter store, so you don't have to use secrets manager all the time. Is there actually a performance difference if I'm now calling from Lambda parameter store or what they are supporting secret manager, I guess, and KMS maybe as well? So is there any performance differences you found, or?
Not that I find. If anybody finds that, I would be interested in knowing.
Okay.
I don't think there would be, encryption is something that is so pervasive in AWS. Everything is encrypted. So I wouldn't expect there to be any particular issue with that.
So I just look at the code, and the code this is under utility, but it's really nice. So it's like the Lambda way. It's like a parameter store is SSM provider.get, to the point, and you get exactly get multiple get string secrets provider gets. So I would say this is what I see. This will save me a lot of time.
Yeah, and would you, how do you typically do caching? Would you always pull down parameters on every request? Because that's something that we've also tried to help with. So we allow customers to cache values so that they don't have to make requests to SSM or Secrets Manager each time. We allow people to set default ages so things can expire. So we think it's really good, and we think it will probably help not just with simplicity of programming, but probably people are requesting secrets each time. A bit of caching will probably actually improve performance quite a lot.
So you are caching in the temp folder, or where are you caching, or in static?
Just in memory.
In memory, yeah. Okay. This is what happens in my projects automatically, because if a Lambda, I have two kinds of Lambdas. So either it is looks like a Java application, which is JAX-RS, or the fully asynchronous Lambda. And the JAX-RS Lambda, what usually happens, all the classes are singletons anyway. So there's like application scoped Quarkus. And the injection of secrets and configuration happens via microprofile config. So if you inject something, it is cached by default. Or if you would like to have a fresh token, then you have to do something about that, and you are injecting an instance of the thing. So, so I mean, the caching is solved by default in the synchronous Lambda, which is called by REST and HTTP gateways, and or load balancer. And the asynchronous Lambdas, we don't use any frameworks there. So I'm still thinking about, in plain asynchronous Lambda, we could use Quarkus with full dependency injection, and Quarkus is lean enough. There's no reflection, nothing. So there will be no performance impact. But right now I'm experimenting whether, plain Pojo without nothing, maybe Powertools from Lambda, or we really need, dependency injection there. So this is no unsolved, best practice.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. And then the other kind of core utility that we were always asked about was tracing. So if you're looking at the tracing space for AWS, you're probably looking at X-Ray, and probably considering that along with some others. So again, we've kind of looked at the X-Ray API and looked at how we can improve on that and make it a bit more Java specific. So we've added annotations. Again, it's typically the approach that we take, and we're trying to help people to create subsegments. So if you're familiar with X-Ray, it's one of those kind of bar graph, time graphs that's produced, and by default, you're going to get some very broad information, but the ideal scenario is then to take that ability and then to create subsegments so that you can understand where in your application particular which bits of the application may be faster or slower than others. So we with the Powertools project are helping to be able to scope that and produce subsegments more easily around particular functions. So you can add an annotation to a function and automatically create a custom subsegment.
I think X-Ray supports the open tracing format behind the scenes, because very, very similar to span IDs and stuff like that. And I think your subsegment is like a span. So what happens in plain Java outside the cloud, so you can have with one annotation called traced, you can influence whether you would like to have a subsegment or span for a method. So you have, the entry point, and then, submethod. So it's more granular. And this is, I think, what you are doing, that you can say, okay, I would like to see also this method as an individual timeline or whatever it's called in X-Ray, right?
Yeah, so if you were using X-Ray, just the plain Java SDK, you would have an X-Ray object, and you would say create subsegment, start, stop. And what we've done is we've made that easier by encapsulating that within an annotation. So instead of having all that extra code in each of your functions that you want to create a span for or a subsegment, you add the annotation and it will be done automatically for you. We'll just capture the start and stop.
Okay, and this is great. What I also noticed is that if you would like to have a segment, you call it, or span between Lambda calls, let's say you have a Lambda and Kinesis and another Lambda, sometimes it works out of the box and sometimes you have to do something about that, right? So, which was annoying at the beginning. It's like, hey, what? I'm in the cloud. I expect everything to happen magically, and now I have to do something about that. And you also have support for that?
No, so there's not much we can do about that. So if a AWS service does not support X-Ray, then unfortunately you do get breaks in the tracing. So you will get a section of the system that is connected, and then there'll be a break, and then there'll be another section of the system. Something that we're always looking to improve, and we're always listening to customer feedback, and we're trying to do as much as we can with what we can, and prioritize the services that are most used. So,
but
if you look back, X-Ray was added for EventBridge recently.
But what you could do, you could actually pass, the ID with the message, whatever the service has, and on the other side, you could parse that and start the span again, right? So this could be done by Powertools. Yes,
we could. It would be a bit of effort, but that's an interesting idea. We should have a look at that. So I'm not entirely sure how much we would need to do, but that's an interesting idea. I wonder if we could bring that to customers.
I had to do this back in time because with JMS we had the same problem, right? The messages are back and forth, and you have JMS server were not aware of open tracing or Jaeger.
Yeah.
So I immediately thought of.
And in the same way, with logging, we have added some functionality within the tracing tool to allow you to automatically add exceptions. So if you have an exception in your code, that will automatically get added to the X-Ray call, so that when you look back at the thread of execution in X-Ray, you'll be able to have the full Java stack trace as part of the error section of X-Ray. And again, you can always add your own annotations to X-Ray traces as well. So if we go back to the scenario for logging, you could add customer ID or customer order. And again, you can search for X-ray traces associated to a particular customer or a particular order. So if you found that, one customer is consistently having a bad experience, then you can go find the traces, and maybe there's some hunting that you can do from that information.
What we also had to do in some projects, we even opened sometimes the trace, the true trace, not X-ray trace, in the browser, to track the entire experience. So we say, okay, the user has web components, calls our fetch method. So we captured the ID, send it to server, and the server stored that, and then we the entire transaction. So this, of course, a little bit. No, we could actually do this because the information's in the header. The header is transparently passed via the proxy API gateway proxy to let's say my world Quarkus, and we get the header injected, so there is nothing to do. So we just completely transparent, and then we could use Lambda Powertools, to open a new segment. So I would get the complete traceability from client. Just interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to work with you on that, and let's see if we can try it out.
Yeah, and another thing is what you're logging. Let's say if Lambda calls Lambda, regardless what's in between, the CloudWatch logs, would I recognize the entire transaction? Because every Lambda has a dedicated log. But what I could do, this is what usually X-Ray does, or open tracing. This is what I get from my clients. Also, even outside Lambda, they ask me always, if there are multiple microservices and one microservice calls the other, can we recognize the business transaction which flows, between the microservices?
That's really interesting. Yeah. So a correlation ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is a feature that's in Python, in the Python version of Powertools, but we don't yet have it as part of the Java Powertools. So you definitely caught me out there. It would be something that we should probably add. And now, especially now that you've mentioned that, I should probably look into doing that.
That's impossible because the Python developers are a lot slower than Javas. They have no to care about the formatting. We have our own formatter, so we should be faster actually. So just kidding.
That's a very good point. Yeah, having and the way that's been implemented is that for each specific event, maybe you've got an API gateway or some other event that's coming to Lambda. The way that it's been implemented is that for certain event types, they will just take the correlation ID from a default field from the event. So from API gateway, that might be the request ID, and then that will just be automatically added as a correlation ID. But also, you have the ability that if you've got a custom correlation ID that's part of your application, you can specify where in the event that correlation ID is, and it will just pull it out of the structure and add it to everything.
One question, why something like Lambda Powertools? I mean, this is perfectly usable for all projects. It's not a part of the Lambda API. Why we have two projects, We have the Lambda Powertools and we have the Lambda API. Because for me, if I what I would expect from AWS is, okay, this is Java, our best practice, go ahead and use it, right? I maybe I know already the answer, but I'm curious what.
Yeah, I guess we like AWS is a very experimental business, and this is a experiment, and we are looking at how we can best serve customer demand. And this is a way that we could get started really quickly, look at the problems that customers are having, which is, adapting to maybe a different model of programming. And, maybe in the future it will be part of, the Lambda API and more integrated. But at the moment, it's very easy for us to get started and to distribute something like this and to gather feedback. And hopefully, if it's successful enough, then that might be the case.
You're right. This was unfair because this is a young project, right? So it was like 1 year old, and Lambda is 7 years old or 8 years, so it's an older one. So but then this is more like an incubator, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I look at the Lambda programming model, if I look at something like the context object, you can get the Lambda logger from the context object. Well, wouldn't it be fantastic if you could get the metrics logger from the context object?
This was my thinking.
So I would really, I would really like that. And then, it would be very easy for me to produce metrics and produce EMF style metrics without having to think about all these other, different libraries that, if I don't know about, then I don't know to use them. Absolutely. I'm in total agreement. Okay,
perfect. So what you also have is Powertools CloudFormation, which is interesting because, what's about that?
So this is probably pretty specific. So in CloudFormation, you can call something which is called a custom resource. And it's just a little bit of an awkward API. So we have produced a specialized handler, so that you can not have to worry about the kind of the weirdness of working with CloudFormation. So you receive an object and do the work on it, and it'll automatically do some of the processing for you. So it's probably not as widely used as some of the other modules, but it's a pain to do. And again, we want to reduce the friction for programmers. So wherever we see something that is used over and over again in the same sort of way, we want to reduce the effort for everyone out there.
It's great news because it's one of the killer features what I need sometimes. What is the killer use case for a custom resource in your case? Can you?
It is the thing that people go to when they need something that they can't do in any other way.
I can tell you, to my knowledge, it is impossible with CloudFormation or CDK to generate SSH keys for EC2 machine, for instance. So I thought of already creating, a custom resource for CDK just to automate that. This is not always needed because usually I use the, how it's called, the secure way to connect without SSH keys. I forgot the name. It's like the WebSocket connection, which is very secure.
Yeah.
How it's called? Session manager. System manager, session manager. This is the official name. So you don't need the SSH keys. But for the SSH keys, I already thought a bit my own custom resource, and it was okay, but then I will just call the SDK directly, create the SSH keys, and I have them. But with the Powertools project, I will absolutely use that. This would be this would change my past actually.
Have a look and see if that would, or how you would change your code.
Very good. So what we also have is Powertools SQS is another one.
Yeah. So there's a couple of use cases that we wanted to look at here. So there is a Java client library called the Extended Client Library for SQS, and it's also available for SNS as well now. So SNS and SQS have a file size limit to what messages you can send, and that always comes up in customer conversations that maybe they're integrating with a partner and a partner can't guarantee the size of the message. And there's always, a tentative, acceptance or worry there. So what the extended client library does for SQS and SNS is it backs off that data to S3.
Oh, okay.
And instead replaces the message with a pointer to S3. And then when that message is picked up on the consumer side, then it knows to download from S3, replace the information in the message, and then to the consumer, it's invisible, and the consumer doesn't know that message has been retrieved from S3. And we wanted to bring the same functionality to Lambda. We want Lambda customers to be able to do that sort of transparent retrieval, whether they're using Lambda or Fargate or some other mechanism. But that's a little bit more difficult because customers don't have access to how Lambda retrieves information from SQS. There's no way of adding an additional hook there. So what we've done in Powertools is, again, produced another annotation that if you annotate the handler with SQS large message, that it will know that you could be retrieving large messages from S3, and it will do that on your behalf. And then it will inject the payload into the SQS event. So again, to the programmer, it's completely invisible whether that was or was not ever retrieved from S3.
This is an excellent idea, actually. This is not, for me, it would be even a best practice. I mean, if you have a message, to put it in S3, you just transport, the raw message with the ID to the S3 object. Could be, why should I send Excel via Lambda if I can store it, in S3, and if something breaks, is even I can repeat the transaction even.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really comes down to the specific use case. Obviously, there are going to be some use cases where people don't want to have the additional cost of storage, but then again, yeah, absolutely, there are going to be some use cases where that information is really valuable. And again, we allow customers to either delete the information from S3 after it's been used, or to retain it there. So again, we give people the flexibility that we think most commonly will be used, but we default things to the sensible defaults, so you don't have to understand all of the configuration just to start.
Pretty useful. So SQS, I'm really already just waiting until our session is over, to try it out.
Oh, fantastic.
And so power tool tracing, I think was the X-Ray thing, right? And validation is another one.
Yes. So validation, often what happens is that you have a business object inside a Amazon object. So again, let's think about SQS. So often within an SQS object, you will have your business object. The body of an SQS event will probably be, your business object, whether that is a request for an order or a request for, who knows what. So we allow you to validate that business object, which is inside of an AWS wrapper, so that you can just, do this validation easier and quicker. So we use JSON-Schema to do that validation using the JMESPath, the Jackson library. And hopefully it's just a very common task that people do that's just made a bit easier.
Actually, great news. And if I look at the Power Tools, I immediately took a look at the POM XML. And what I didn't like at all was the aspect weaver. But I now understand why. Because why not? This AOP was really big, at least in Germany. So I had always, was asked why I'm not using AOP, but for me it was pointless. If I have my Java E application servers, they already did security, transactions, monitoring. There was like invisible aspects. I never had, to write my own aspects, and I had no idea. I don't see any business aspects because they're really hard to implement something with business logic. But I understood why, because I guess you are using bytecode weaving, so not to use reflection. So you are using aspects for performance. Was for me is the first the first usable use case of aspects actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always been a business programmer. I've always written business programming. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a very, very big jump to write functions for frameworks and for frameworks for other developers to use. So it is a big change, and it is definitely outside of what I was used to programming, but it makes absolute sense. And it really helps us to produce, to do those actions before and after a Lambda function is called. Mm-hmm. And it's a really efficient way for us to do it. Mm-hmm. So again, it's taking, the burden is on us to produce these tools that hopefully just make your lives a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And it isn't the most fun style of programming in my eyes.
Yeah, of course.
I get a lot of satisfaction from the feedback that we get from customers, and reducing the amount of code that people have to write.
So I would say it's really cool. Absolutely okay for you to write ugly code if it's fast. This is the Lambda Lambda reality, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was something that we always knew that we wanted to do, and it's always been that way.
Perfect. So it was interesting and nice conversation. Actually, I planned, to talk with you about more serverless architectures, but this was even more useful and interesting. So I would say the next time we can focus more on serverless Lambda and Event Bridge and all the interesting stuff, right?
Yeah, and you'll be able to tell me your experience of Power Tools and give me some honest feedback.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Thank you a lot.
Bye for now.